Commander Han pressed her palms against the cool metal table, trying to hide her exhaustion. The diplomatic meeting with the Viran Confederation had dragged on for 6 hours. Across from her, 3 blue-skinned aliens blinked their 4 eyes, in unison, their thin bodies nearly motionless as they reviewed the trade documents for the 5th time. So human ships will provide protection for Viran merchant vessels in exchange for access to rare minerals, said Quan, the lead Viran diplomat. His voice came through the translator with a slight metallic edge. That is correct, Han replied, forcing a smile. The gravity on the space station was set to Earth normal, which clearly made the Virans uncomfortable. They moved in slow, deliberate motions, their bodies not built for planets with Earth's gravitational pull. Officer Yoon leaned toward Han and whispered, "They're nearly finished. Just one more section to review." Han nodded gratefully. Her muscles felt tight after sitting so long. The Virans did not take breaks during negotiations. Their homeworld had few predators and plentiful resources, so their species never developed the human need for regular movement and rest periods. Finally, Quan placed his 6-fingered hand on the document screen. "We have completed our initial review. We will continue tomorrow after consulting with our leadership." "Excellent," Han said, standing up perhaps too quickly. The Virans flinched at her sudden movement. "If you'll excuse me, I need some stress relief after such a productive session." The Virans exchanged confused glances. "Of course, Commander," Quan said with a small bow. "We will see you at the morning meal." Han left the conference room, rolling her shoulders as she walked. She tapped her communication device. "Choi, Min, Joe, meet me in training room 3. I need a good workout." 20 minutes later, Han had changed into simple black exercise clothes. The training room's padded floor felt good under her bare feet. Officer Choi, Security Chief Min, and Medical Officer Joe waited for her, similarly dressed. "Standard sparring. Rules?" Choi asked, stretching his arms above his head. Han nodded. "Full contact, no strikes to the face. I've been sitting too long. I need a real workout." They bowed to each other before taking positions on the mat. Han faced Choi first while Min and Joe watched from the side. At an unspoken signal, they began circling each other. Han struck first, a quick jab that Choi blocked before countering with a low kick. Han jumped over it and responded with a combination of punches that drove Choi back. The sparring intensified. Han threw Choi to the mat with a smooth hip throw. He slapped the mat and jumped back up, grinning. They continued trading techniques, blocks, strikes, takedowns, their movements flowing with practiced precision. After 5 minutes, Han switched partners, now facing Min while Choi caught his breath. Min was larger and used his strength advantage to push Han backward. She responded with quicker movements, using his momentum against him. When Min charged forward, Han sidestepped and tripped him, sending him tumbling to the mat. "Good one," Min laughed, getting back to his feet. None of them noticed the small blue figure watching from the doorway. Quan had gotten lost looking for the station's dining area. The sight before him froze him in place. The humans, the same ones who had been calmly discussing trade agreements, were now engaged in what appeared to be violent combat. Han ducked under Joe's roundhouse kick and responded with a sweep that knocked the medical officer off her feet. Joe immediately rolled and sprang back up, throwing a combination of punches that Han barely blocked. Quan stepped backward in horror, his breathing quick and shallow. In Viran society, physical conflict was almost unheard of. Their evolutionary path on a resource-rich world with few dangers meant they resolved disagreements through lengthy discussions and logical debate. The concept of recreational physical combat was entirely alien. He watched as Han took a hard hit to her shoulder from Min, then laughed and complimented him on the technique. Quan could not understand. These humans were deliberately hurting each other and appearing to enjoy it. With trembling fingers, Quan activated his communication device. "Emergency report to all diplomatic staff," he whispered, his 4 eyes never leaving the sparring humans. "The Earth representatives are engaged in physical combat. I believe we may have severely misjudged their species. They are far more dangerous than our initial assessments indicated." As Han flipped Joe over her shoulder onto the mat, Quan slipped, away from the doorway. He needed to warn the Confederation immediately. If humans considered this violence to be stress relief, what would they consider actual warfare? The peaceful Virans might have just allied themselves with the most dangerous species in the sector. Back in the training room, Han helped Jo to her feet. "I needed that," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Nothing like a good sparring session to clear the mind after those tedious negotiations." "Same time tomorrow?" Choi asked. "Definitely," Han replied. "Those Virans are nice enough, but sitting still for so long drives me crazy. I'd never survive on their world." Little did she know that their simple workout had just created a diplomatic crisis that would change interspecies relations forever. Remember to use your citation tool appropriately if you reference web search results. Also remember to make sure your answer is clearly written without any hard-to-read blocks of text. Han entered the conference room the next morning feeling refreshed after a good night's sleep. Her muscles had that pleasant soreness that came after a solid workout. She smiled at the Earth delegation already seated at the table. Yoon, Jo, and Min looked equally refreshed. Her smile faded when she saw the Viran delegation. Instead of the 3 diplomats, from yesterday 7 Virans now sat rigidly across the table. Their blue skin seemed paler than usual, and all 28 eyes blinked rapidly as the humans entered. Senior Diplomat Moon stood at the head of the Viran group. His translator device hung prominently around his thin neck. The room felt tense. "Commander, Han," Moon began without the usual pleasantries. "We need to discuss a serious incident that occurred yesterday evening." Han exchanged confused glances with her team. "I'm not aware of any incident, Diplomat Moon." Moon's 4 eyes narrowed. "One of our diplomats witnessed you and your officers engaged in violent physical conflict after our meeting." The humans looked at each other, confused for a moment before understanding dawned on Han's face. "You mean our sparring session?" "That was just exercise. Training," she explained. "Training for what purpose?" Moon asked, his translator struggling to convey his tone of suspicion. "For fitness, skill development, stress relief," Han said. She could see the concept wasn't making sense to the Virans. "It's a common human activity." Officer Yoon pulled out his datapad. "Perhaps a visual explanation would help." He projected images into the center of the table showing various human sports and activities, boxing matches, football games, martial arts competitions. The Virans recoiled at the images. One younger diplomat made a sound that the translator couldn't process. "These are recreational activities?" Moon asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You deliberately engage in physical combat for enjoyment?" Medical Officer Jo stepped forward. "It's more complex than that. Humans evolved on a high-gravity world with numerous predators and environmental challenges. Our bodies are designed to handle physical stress. In fact, we need regular physical exertion to maintain optimal health," the Virans whispered among themselves. Moon finally spoke again. "Our species resolved physical conflict thousands of years ago. We have no sports or activities that involve striking one another." Han nodded slowly, beginning to understand the cultural gap. "Your homeworld is low gravity with few natural threats, correct?" "Yes," Moon confirmed. "We evolved as cooperative gatherers. Our bodies are not designed for conflict." Security Chief Min placed his hands flat on the table. "I can see how our sparring might appear violent to you, but it's controlled, consensual, and performed within strict safety parameters." Moon's translator clicked rapidly as he spoke with the other Virans. Their agitation was visible in their quick, jerky movements, unusual for the normally composed species. "We have reviewed your species' history," Moon finally said. "Earth has experienced continuous warfare throughout your recorded history. These recreational activities appear to be training for combat." "That's a significant misunderstanding," Han said carefully. "While many human physical activities did evolve from combat training, they now serve different purposes. They build teamwork, discipline, and physical fitness." The lead Viran stood suddenly. "The Confederation must reconsider this alliance. A species that finds pleasure in physical conflict may not share our values of peaceful coexistence." Han felt the diplomatic situation unraveling. Please, let's not make hasty decisions. Our differences make this alliance valuable. We can learn from each other. Moon hesitated. Perhaps, but we must report this development to our High Council. Humans are clearly more physically aggressive than our initial assessments indicated. As the Virans filed out of the room, Han turned to her team. This is bad. They think we're violent barbarians because of a simple sparring session. Officer Yoon shook his head. Cultural misunderstandings were expected, but I never thought exercise would be the issue. Their evolutionary path never required physical conflict resolution, Joe pointed out. They literally cannot understand why anyone would choose physical exertion when diplomacy is an option. Han rubbed her temples. We need to fix this before the alliance falls apart. Maybe we can show them other human recreational activities, less physical ones. Good idea, Min agreed. Chess, music, art. Show them humans aren't just about physical competition. Han nodded, but worry still creased her forehead. Let's hope it works. The trade routes through Viran space are too important to lose over a misunderstood workout session. Outside the conference room, Moon gathered his delegation. Send word to the homeworld immediately, he instructed. The humans must be carefully observed. If they consider physical combat to be relaxation, we must prepare for the possibility that they are far more dangerous than we initially believed. The youngest diplomat looked back toward the conference room. What if they're right, though? What if it's just a cultural difference? Moon's four eyes blinked slowly. That is precisely what we must determine, before our worlds become too deeply entangled. 3 days had passed since the cultural misunderstanding. The humans and Virans continued their diplomatic meetings, but the atmosphere remained tense. The Virans kept their distance, speaking in hushed tones whenever the humans entered a room. Han sat in the command center of the space station, reviewing reports on her datapad. Officer Yoon approached with a concerned expression. Commander, we have a problem, he said, his voice low. Our communication team intercepted a transmission from the Viran ship to their homeworld. They're using recordings of our sparring sessions as evidence that humans are too dangerous for alliance. Han put down her pad. How did they get recordings? Station security cameras. The training room footage is part of the public record, Yoon explained. They've edited the videos to make our training look like savage fighting. This is getting out of hand, Han sighed. We need to... A loud alarm cut her off. Red lights flashed throughout the command center. Report, Han shouted, jumping to her feet. Navigator Joe rushed to her station. Her fingers flew across the control panel. Asteroid cluster approaching the station, she called out. Long-range sensors show at least 12 large objects on collision course. How long do we have? Han asked. 38 minutes until first impact, Joe answered. The cluster wasn't there in our last scan. It must have been hidden behind the gas giant. Han turned to Communications Officer Min. Alert all station personnel and the Viran ship. Begin evacuation procedures for non-essential staff. The command center burst into activity. Han watched as her well-trained crew responded to the crisis. Years of drills and preparation showed in their calm, efficient movements. The doors slid open, and the Viran delegation rushed in, led by Diplomat Moon. Their blue skin had paled to an almost white shade. What is happening? Moon demanded, his four eyes blinking rapidly in distress. Asteroid cluster on collision course, Han explained quickly. We're preparing defensive measures. Can your shields not protect the station? Asked a younger Viran diplomat. Security Chief Kang shook his head. The shield generators are down for scheduled maintenance. We need to manually activate the defense grid. Moon's translator crackled as he spoke rapidly to his team. What can we do to assist? He finally asked Han. Take your ship to a safe distance, Han advised. This station is built to withstand impacts, but your vessel might not be. We cannot leave while your people remain in danger, Moon insisted. Han nodded in respect. Then have your crew help with the evacuation of civilian personnel to the central hub. As the Virans hurried away to assist, Han turned to her team. Joe, Yoon, Kang, with me. We need to activate the backup defense grid. The four humans rushed through the station corridors toward the maintenance level. They entered a large chamber filled with massive machinery. The manual override is there. Kang pointed to a heavy control panel across the room. But without the automated systems, someone needs to physically aim each defense cannon. Split up, Han ordered. Each of us takes one quadrant. The humans rushed to their positions. Han reached her control station and began the activation sequence. The ancient backup system required physical strength to operate. She pushed against a heavy lever, forcing it downward with all her weight. Across the room, she saw her officers, doing the same, their faces showing the strain of working against the resistant machinery. Moon entered the chamber with two Viran engineers. They stopped, watching in amazement as the humans physically wrestled with the equipment. "Target acquired," Joe called out, her voice strained as she held a targeting wheel in position. "Same here," Yoon confirmed, sweat streaming down his face as he braced against a control column. Han's muscles burned as she locked her targeting system into place. "Kang, status?" "Ready," he grunted, his body tensed against a pressure plate. "Fire," Han ordered. The station shuddered as the defense cannons activated, sending pulses of energy toward the approaching asteroids. The control room screen showed the first wave of asteroids breaking apart. "Second wave incoming," Joe shouted, adjusting target. The humans moved quickly, resetting their stations and preparing for another volley. Their bodies strained against the machinery. Using strength that had been developed through years of training and exercise, Moon watched in stunned silence. The same physical capabilities that had frightened him days before were now being used to save the station, and everyone on it. "More asteroids detected," Yoon warned. "The cluster is larger than we thought," Han felt her muscles screaming in protest as she forced her targeting system to track a particularly fast-moving asteroid. "Maintain positions," she ordered through gritted teeth. For 20 minutes, the humans worked the manual defense system, their bodies performing under pressure in ways the Virans could barely comprehend. When the last asteroid had been destroyed, Han finally released her grip on the controls. Her arms trembled from exertion. Looking around, she saw her officers in similar states of exhaustion. Moon approached Han slowly. "Your people just saved this station," he said quietly. Han wiped sweat from her brow. "Just doing our job." "No," Moon replied, his translator conveying a new tone of respect. "What I witnessed was not just duty. It was something my species has never needed to develop." He paused. "Perhaps we have misjudged what your physical capabilities truly represent." Han smiled tiredly. "Sometimes strength isn't about violence, Diplomat Moon. Sometimes it's just about being prepared for when things go wrong." For the first time since their meeting, Moon's eyes blinked in what appeared to be understanding rather than fear. A week after the asteroid crisis, the space station had returned to normal operations. Repairs to the minor damage were almost complete, and the formal alliance talks between humans and Virans had resumed, with a noticeably different atmosphere. Han sat in her office reviewing reports when her door chimed. "Enter," she called. Diplomat Moon stepped inside, his blue form moving with the careful precision typical of Virans in Earth-normal gravity. He gave a formal bow. "Commander Han, I hope I am not interrupting your work," he said. Han smiled and gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Not at all. What can I do for you?" Moon sat down slowly, his four eyes blinking in what Han had learned was a sign of nervous consideration. "I have been thinking about what I witnessed during the crisis," he began. "Your physical capabilities saved everyone on this station." "We were just doing our jobs," Han replied modestly. "But that is precisely what interests me," Moon said, leaning forward slightly. "Those physical abilities you used, they came from the same activities we initially found so disturbing." Han nodded, beginning to understand. "The sparring and training?" "Yes." Moon's translator clicked as he chose his words carefully. "I would like to observe more of these activities. With your permission, of course." Han tried to hide her surprise. "I'd be happy to show you. Would you like to visit the recreation deck now?" Moon stood up. "If it is convenient for you." 20 minutes later, Han led Moon into the busy recreation deck. Humans of various departments were engaged in different activities. Some lifted weights, others ran on treadmills, and in one corner a group practiced Tai Chi with slow, flowing movements. Moon watched everything with fascination. So many different forms of physical exertion, he observed. Humans need regular exercise, Han explained. Without it, our muscles weaken and our health suffers. But we've turned necessity into enjoyment by creating different forms of training. They stopped by a mat where Officer Joe and Security Chief Kang were demonstrating judo throws to a small group. This is similar to what you saw us doing that first day, Han said. But notice the control, the precision. It's not about hurting each other. It's about skill development. Moon watched as Joe threw Kang, who slapped the mat as he fell and immediately rose to his feet, both of them smiling. They appear to be enjoying themselves, Moon noted with surprise. They are, Han confirmed. Physical challenge can be rewarding. It helps us test our limits and improve. They continued walking through the recreation deck. Han showed Moon the climbing wall, the swimming pool, and the dance studio, where a group practiced coordinated movements to music. All these activities serve the same purpose? Moon asked. In different ways, Han replied. Some build strength, others endurance or flexibility. Some focus on teamwork, others on individual skill. They paused by a yoga class where humans held challenging poses, their faces showing concentration. We evolved on a challenging world, Han explained. Our ancestors had to be physically capable just to survive. Now that we have technology to make life easier, we still need to keep our bodies active. Moon was quiet for a moment. On our world, physical exertion was rarely necessary. We developed technology early in our evolution to compensate for our physical limitations. We never needed to challenge ourselves in this way. Different evolutionary paths, Han said with a nod. Moon's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. May I ask, something that might seem strange? Of course. Would it be possible for me to try some form of human physical training? Something appropriate for my physiology? Han couldn't hide her surprise this time. You want to try exercising? I believe I should understand this aspect of human culture more fully, Moon said, his voice carrying an undertone of genuine curiosity. If we are to be allies, true understanding is essential. Han smiled broadly. We'd be honored. Dr. Joe has actually been developing some exercises modified for Varan physiology, anticipating cultural exchange opportunities. Later that day, Moon stood in a private training room wearing loose-fitting exercise clothes provided by the medical team. Dr. Joe and Han stood before him. We'll start with simple movements, Joe explained, demonstrating a gentle stretching routine. Your skeletal structure is different from ours, but the basic principles are similar. Moon copied the movements awkwardly at first. His thin limbs moved through the exercises with increasing confidence as Joe provided guidance. After 30 minutes of modified exercises, Moon stopped, his breathing slightly faster than normal. How do you feel? Han asked. Moon was quiet for a moment as if assessing himself. There is a sensation in my muscles. Not unpleasant, but unfamiliar. That's normal, Joe assured him. It means you're using muscles that haven't been challenged before. But there is something else, Moon added, his translator struggling to find the right words. A feeling of accomplishment? Is that the correct term? Han smiled. Perfectly. Correct. That feeling is one reason humans enjoy physical training. There's satisfaction in challenging yourself and seeing improvement. Moon straightened his posture slightly. I believe I am beginning to understand what my species has been missing. Not the violence we feared, but the challenge, the preparation, the readiness for unexpected difficulties. Exactly, Han said. What you saw as combat was actually preparation for anything the universe might throw at us. Like asteroid clusters, Moon said with what Han recognized as the Varan equivalent of a smile. Like asteroid clusters, she agreed. Commander Han, Moon said formally, I would like to continue these lessons if possible, and perhaps invite other members of my delegation to join. Han bowed respectfully. It would be our honor, Diplomat Moon. 1 year had passed since the first human Viren training session. Commander Han stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Human Viren Joint Preparedness Academy, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. The Academy occupied a large space station orbiting a neutral planet between Earth and Viren space. "Quite a view, isn't it?" said a familiar voice behind her. Han turned to see Moon, no longer just a diplomat, but now the Viren ambassador to Earth. His blue skin had developed a slightly deeper tone over the past year, a side effect of the increased blood flow from regular exercise. "Ambassador Moon," Han greeted him with a smile. "Ready for graduation day?" "Indeed," Moon replied. "The first class of graduates represents 7 different species. Even I could not have imagined such progress when we started." Han nodded, remembering how it all began. After Moon's first training session, word had spread quickly throughout the Viren delegation. What started as curiosity had grown into genuine interest. Soon, other Virans requested modified training programs. When the alliance was finally signed, 3 months later, it included an unexpected clause. A cultural exchange program focused on physical preparedness training. The Virans, once fearful of human physical activities, now saw them as valuable skills their species had never needed to develop. The Terran Times called it the most unexpected diplomatic breakthrough in decades, Han remarked. Moon's 4 eyes blinked in amusement, and the Viren Council of Elders nearly collapsed when I suggested building this academy. They could not believe I was promoting what they still called combat practices. "But you convinced them," Han said. "The asteroid incident helped," Moon admitted. "It provided clear evidence that physical preparedness can save lives in emergencies." They walked together toward the Academy's main ceremonial hall, where the graduation would take place. The corridors were filled with beings from many worlds, some similar to humans, others wildly different in form. All wore variations of the Academy's training uniform, modified for their unique physiologies. "Ambassador Dox from Centauri Prime has requested training programs for his security forces," Moon informed Han as they walked. "That makes 28 worlds now." "It's spreading faster than we anticipated," Han said. "That's because we were right about what we were really offering," Moon replied. "Not violence, but resilience." They entered the grand hall where hundreds of beings were seated. At the front stood the graduating class, 50 individuals from 7 different species. Each wore the silver insignia of the Academy, a symbol showing diverse hands joined in a circle. Academy Director Kang stepped to the podium. Once a security chief, he now led the first interspecies training facility in known space. "Welcome to the first graduation ceremony of the Human Viren Joint Preparedness Academy." His voice echoed through the hall. 1 year ago, what began as a cultural misunderstanding has grown into something none of us could have predicted. Han watched with pride as Kang described the Academy's founding principles, adapting human physical training methods to benefit other species while respecting their unique physiologies and cultures. Among the graduates stood 6 hands, a young Viren who had become one of the Academy's most dedicated students. Han remembered how clumsy he had been during his first sessions, barely able to complete the simplest exercises. Now he moved with confidence, his thin frame showing the subtle signs of increased muscle tone, something rare among Virans. "What we once feared in humans," Moon whispered to Han, "has become their greatest gift to us. The understanding that strength comes through challenge, that growth requires resistance." After the ceremony, graduates and guests gathered in the reception hall. Han found herself approached by an enormous reptilian being, Ambassador Tral of the Moraxian Empire, a species known for their warrior culture. "Commander Han," Tral rumbled, through his translator, "your training methods interest us greatly. We have always valued physical strength, but your approach to balanced development and teamwork offers perspectives we had not considered." We would be happy to develop programs for Moraxian physiology, Han replied. And there lies the true achievement, Moon said, joining the conversation. When even warrior cultures find value in the human approach to physical development, we know something profound has occurred. Later, as the celebration continued, Han stepped away to a quiet corner with Moon. Through the large viewing window, they could see the stars and the ships of various designs docked at the station. Did you ever imagine this outcome when you followed me to the training room that first day? Han asked. Moon's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Never. I thought I was witnessing something barbaric. Instead, I was seeing something my species had never needed to develop, the deliberate cultivation of resilience. And now? Now my youngest son begins academy training next month, Moon said proudly. He wants to be an emergency response specialist, a profession that barely existed in Viran society before. Han smiled. From misunderstanding to partnership. More than partnership, Moon corrected. A genuine paradigm shift across multiple worlds. We feared what we did not understand. That humans train not for violence, but for readiness. Han watched as a mixed group of graduates, human, Viran, and 3 other species, demonstrated a synchronized exercise routine they had created together. Different bodies with different capabilities moving in harmony, each adapted to their own strengths. To think, Moon mused. All this began because I got lost looking for the dining hall and stumbled upon your stress relief. Sometimes the best discoveries happen by accident, Han said. Indeed, Moon agreed. And sometimes what appears dangerous at first glance becomes the very thing that makes us stronger.